Welcome back to High School Backups Podcast. My name is Jake. I am here with Kyle. First and foremost, make sure to like the video, subscribe, follow us on socials, High School Backups at Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And here we're talking about the next three quarterbacks that I have evaluated, including Jake Haener, Tanner McKee, and Hendon Hooker. This does not indicate that they are QBs 5, 6, or 7 in the class, just an evaluation and breakdown of all three. We're going to start with the more well-known name, Hendon Hooker out of Tennessee. I'm going to pull up my notes real quick. Kyle, why don't you tell me a little bit about your impressions of Hendon Hooker?
I'll be honest, I don't know a whole lot about him. The only game I really watched from him, I watched a couple games, but the biggest one that I really took a deep dive in on Hendon Hooker was the Tennessee Alabama game. To me, that was the big indication on who Hendon Hooker is as a top quality quarterback prospect. And I'll be honest, I didn't love what I saw.
I
Um,
mean, the Alabama game was his best game of the year. He threw for 5 touchdowns and 1 interception. Jalen Hyatt went nuts. I think he had 3 touchdowns in that game. So,
yes, and that's saying something considering you just called it his best game of the year, and I didn't love what I saw with it.
in the
You
Alabama
know,
game, he was 21 of 30 for 385, 5 TDs, and a pick, and you really didn't love that? I mean,
I didn't. I'll be honest. I didn't like what I saw from him. I'll be
don't get me
honest.
wrong. I'm like, we're gonna talk about it. I didn't like. I have the same impression. I'm not overly impressed with Hendon Hooker as a prospect. I'm gonna start with the first and foremost fact that he's gonna be 26 at some point in his rookie year. Like he is older than Lamar Jackson, and I know a lot of people rag on Stetson Bennett for that, but nobody talks about it with Hendon Hooker, which is a little weird. He's 25 currently. He's gonna be 26 during his rookie year, and I think that lowers his value a lot.
I agree. And the other game that I was watching with Hendon Hooker was him versus Georgia.
Yep,
Um,
worst game of the
and
year.
were absolutely horrible. He had interception, 195 yards, no touchdowns. Really, really bad play from him. Georgia pretty much dominated him from the defensive side, let alone on the offensive side. And the one great drive they had was the Jalen Wright touchdown, where I think he rushed from like the 5 or something yard line, something like
Yeah,
that.
whatever it is.
Um, and that wasn't really of what Hendon Hooker was. This is like that game
Yeah.
was just not good
And
for
I'm
him.
gonna
You know?
start with some of Hendon Hooker's weaknesses, like who his comp is. First and foremost, Hendon Hooker is 6'4", 220 pounds. Actually, he reminds me a lot of Geno Smith coming out of college. Geno
Okay.
Smith, if you remember, was a first round pick. I don't think the Jets would do that again. Obviously, Geno has a really great year this year, but overall, over the course of his career, he's been basically a backup. But also love the fact that Geno Smith had a career revival in Seattle. Really do. I love that. This is not a knock on Hendon Hooker. It's more just a matter of fact. I mean, he's going to be 26 during his rookie year, like we said. He has a tendency to overthrow receivers, which is going to lead to more interceptions in the NFL than it did in college. I mean, like it's all over the tape. For a guy who has a 70% completion percentage, you'd expect him to be more accurate, and he's just not. Like the ball's all over the place.
It wasn't good.
He
It really
never
wasn't.
he never also never has to throw into tight windows. In that RPO style offense, it's a lot of wide open receivers, and so it's you don't have to be as accurate. You like to get that high of a completion percentage. You don't have to be as accurate in this RPO style offense. And his deep ball is incredibly inconsistent, or rather, I should say, it's incredibly consistent in the fact that he can only hit Jalen Hyatt on deep throws. Anytime he targets anybody else on a deep pass, the ball sails, but he hits Jalen Hyatt almost every time. So it's very weird. He also has a slight fumble issue, which reminds me a little bit of Daniel Jones. That's not actually a shot. Like he has a fumble issue that reminds me of Daniel Jones's fumble issue when Daniel Jones came out of college. In what was it, 2018?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
To the strengths, he really doesn't ever turn the ball over except for those fumble issues. He had 2 INTs his senior year, combined 5 total interceptions over the last 2 years. While he's thrown for 58 touchdown passes. To do the math, that is an 11.6 to 1 ratio of touchdowns to interceptions in the air. He's also incredibly consistent with his statistics at least his passing touchdowns. He had 2 or 3 passing touchdowns in every game but 2 this year. He had 5 against Alabama and 0 against Georgia. He has a quick release and he has a live arm. His arm is actually probably stronger than I thought it was. With the accuracy thing, with the completion percentage, I thought he was going to be kind of a slower passer with more accuracy. I was surprised to see that he had more velocity than I thought, but he was less accurate than I thought he would be. And he's athletic enough to pick up first downs. A lot of people think his athleticism is like otherworldly. I don't think so. I don't think it's the strength of his game. A lot of people would say it was. I think he's just athletic enough to pick up first downs. I don't think he's breaking big plays for you like Justin Fields or Anthony Richardson.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's really all I have to say about Hendon Hooker. I mean, you can go watch the tape. Essentially, he overthrows deep balls. He's essentially running an RPO offense, which means he's going to need to go to an RPO offense in the NFL to even translate well, to be honest with you. His footwork isn't wonderful. His dropbacks and stuff like that, his mechanics get a little wonky. And for a 25-year-old, he's not as polished as you'd want him to be. The top fits are all the heavy RPO teams. He's going to be a backup. I mean, he could go to the Dolphins and back up Tua. I think that'd be a wonderful option for them because I don't think Teddy Bridgewater comes back. He could go to the Chiefs and back up Patrick Mahomes. I think that'd be a wonderful option for them with the RPO that they run. The Chargers and the Eagles are also 2 of the RPO-heavy teams in the NFL. No matter where he ends up, he should be a high-end backup in an RPO-style offense. That's really what I think it should be Hendon Hooker's position in the NFL.
I think that's a very fair assessment of him. I was saying, he wasn't really that inspiring to me, and I think him being a quality backup, in fact, the number one option as backup in an RPO system is really where he will shine as an NFL quarterback.
That's the best option that is the best fit for him immediately. I'm not saying he couldn't develop into a better just pro style quarterback. Obviously, as the RPO becomes more prevalent in the NFL, probably over the next 5 years, you'll probably see a trend away from it after a 5-year period, like you saw with the read option. When we realized that a lot of quarterbacks were either getting hurt or couldn't run it correctly, unless you're Justin Fields and or Lamar Jackson. I like Hendon Hooker. Again, I think he's just a high-end RPO system backup, and he was what I would call a Tier 3 quarterback in this class. The top tier being alone C.J. Stroud and Bryce Young, Tier 2 being Will Levis and Anthony Richardson, Tier 3 not being complete yet, but Hendon Hooker is in that Tier 3 of quarterbacks.
How do you feel about Hendon Hooker maybe going to San Francisco?
I think it would work. I just don't think there's... I think San Francisco's got their plans. I don't think he fits in as well as the other teams that we talked about. San Francisco might make it work, and Kyle Shanahan's kind of a genius. He'd figure it out. Would I take Trey Lance and or Brock Purdy at this point ahead of him? Yes.
Which is... That's, I think, the fair assessment.
Yeah.
Because even with the only reason I brought them up is with it's pretty uncertain with how Brock Purdy is going right now with his.
I feel so
injury.
bad for Brock Purdy, man.
I do too, dude. I like Brock Purdy, and I really want him to be the starter
so
next
bad
year.
for Brock Purdy.
That injury does not look good. Like, he could not throw the ball the rest of that game.
Dude, he tore his UCL. He shouldn't have been throwing in the first place. Like,
he shouldn't have been.
The fact that Homeboy was even in the game is a testament to how tough Brock Purdy is. Like,
no, I agree.
I can't even believe he was throwing. That's pure adrenaline. Yeah. But
100%.
To your question, I don't love that necessarily. Mm-hmm. I think his best fit is Miami with Mike McDaniel, and they ran RPO pulls, which means they threw out of the RPO, I think 40% of the time, which is Tua's strong suit. I think it's Hendon Hooker's strong suit. And I think and they do it to mask the fact that they don't have a run game. To be very quite honest with you, that's what the Dolphins do. They mask the fact that they don't have a run game with RPO pulls. And that is from a PFF network that are a Pro Football Focus and or the Athletic article I read. I forget which one it was, but I was studying the RPO a little bit with Hendon Hooker, trying to figure out what the best fits would be, and that is what I could deduce from the Dolphins' RPO offense. The next quarterback we're going to talk about is Tanner McKee. Out of Stanford, is a 6'6", 230-pound quarterback, relatively young. He's 22 years old. there's a lot to say about Tanner McKee. I'm going to open with the fact that his throwing motion is as weird as Phillip Rivers' throwing motion was, and I kind of hate it. It bugs me. Um, because this man is 6'6" and he has such a low release point that his ball will get tipped at the line. And when you're 6'6", that simply shouldn't happen. I watched it happen 5 or 6 times on tape. I'm like, what? What?
Out of the three quarterbacks we're talking about today, he's the one I know the least amount. And I'm just briefly looking over his stats from like a game log this year. He had
take
some
that
rough games.
take that with a grain of salt. Stanford's
Okay.
offensive line was absolutely atrocious, and they don't have any weapons. He was making the best of a bad situation, and the only reason that they were in games was because he was playing football. First and
Alright,
foremost, let's start with the strengths of Tanner McKee. First of all, he's 6'6", 230. You love the frame. He's not going to be susceptible to be getting hurt. He's clearly very smart. He goes to Stanford. That speaks for itself. The last couple quarterbacks we saw out of Stanford, Davis Mills and Andrew Luck, were both starters in the league. Andrew Luck more successful than Davis Mills. He's got a live arm. The ball can go sideline to sideline, opposite hash to sideline, whatever he needs to do. He doesn't have any accuracy issues, which is wonderful. He can throw to all levels of the football field and be accurate. That's something you want to see out of a quarterback. He is a pocket passing quarterback. He is not someone who's going to be able to move around, make plays with his feet. Very like old time pocket quarterback with Tanner McKee, if that's the way you want to go. Davis Mills is more athletic. And the reason I keep bringing up Davis Mills is with his body frame school, he really reminds me of Carson Strong and or Davis Mills coming out of Stanford and or Nevada. Was Carson Strong Nevada or Utah State? I can't remember. That's bad. But he reminds me a lot of Carson Strong and or Davis Mills. I think it was Nevada.
I don't know.
I
You
think
keep talking. I'll
it might have
figure
been
it out.
Utah State. Please figure that out because I'm going to look like an idiot with that.
Nevada. It was Nevada.
Okay, cool. He doesn't try to be more than he is athletically, which I think is a plus. He's not like Baker Mayfield, who tries to be more athletic than he really is. He knows his limitation. He stays in the pocket. He can manipulate the pocket really well, which is good. His weaknesses is the fact that he had to run an RPO offense his last year at Stanford, and that's not what I think his game is. If you go back to the 2021 tape and the 2021 season, Kyle, he looked a lot better. And that's because he was in more of a pro-style kind of offense where he was under center, play action passes. They had a better run game and a better line. So out of necessity last year, because they couldn't run the football, they ended up moving to an RPO pull offense where they were throwing a lot of slants, trying to do things that simply they didn't have the playmakers to do. And their line was absolutely garbage. Like, it was absolutely atrocious. Again, he's also not the greatest athlete in the world, and his 2021 tape is stronger than his 2022 tape, and that'll have teams worried. So I don't think this isn't a guy who goes in the 3rd or 4th round. This is a guy who goes in the 5th or 6th round. I saw one mock draft that had him going to the Saints at 29. It's a fan mock draft, so take it with a grain of salt. But like, I don't understand people, dude. I really don't. But
fans do whatever the hell they want. And that's what it comes down to.
But like, when you're talking about Tanner McKee, you're looking at a guy who would probably be a solid backup, and or he's out of the league in 3 years, depending on how he develops.
Yikes.
And honestly, I think this is a smart dude that'll end up being like Brian Hoyer, who takes his time in the league, becomes a seasoned backup, even at 6'6", 230. From what I know, he's a pretty good leader too, very smart. So this is a guy who ends up being a good backup for you at the end of the day. And outside of the top 4 quarterbacks in the class, I really think that's what you're looking for, is somebody who's going to be a good backup for you, if not a bridge quarterback kind of thing later down the line. And with Tanner McKee, you're getting a good one. He doesn't make too many stupid mistakes. He's not gonna win you a game by any means, but he's not going to lose you one either. The top fits for Tanner McKee at this point, I think, are the Jets, the 49ers, the Vikings, and the Lions. Teams that can clearly use decent backup quarterbacks who have run-first offenses with some weapons. And that is basically because if he's forced to play, he's going to need weapons to make him look good. And they're going to need to be a run-first team to make sure that he's limited in the amount of passing attempts that he does have. I think that, again, this is a guy you want as a backup. This isn't a guy you want starting games for you. But those are the top fits with the Jets, the 49ers, the Vikings, and the Lions.
How do you feel about him in Seattle?
I don't think that works. I think you need a better run game than what Seattle has right now. And if they invested in their offensive line and Kenneth Walker develops the way he's supposed to, then maybe that's a better look. But I think the top 4 fits are the ones that I've said.
Okay. Okay.
And we're going to move on to Jake Haener, who is probably my favorite of the 3 quarterbacks we're talking about today, which I think is a hot take because a lot of people don't even know who Jake Haener is. First and foremost, namesake, gotta love him. But also, at 6'1", 200 pounds, he kind of reminds me of a Bryce Young light and or kind of a Baker Mayfield type in the way that he plays. Taylor Haneke has been someone who's thrown around as an NFL comp for him too, which the frame would make sense. I think Jake Haener's got a little bit of a stronger arm, but plays gutsy. Taylor Haneke would be a good comp. Baker Mayfield's a good comp. Bryce Young light is a good comp. If you can't get Bryce Young, Jake Haener becomes your backup. Bryce Young, I guess. Not really. He's not that good, but. Sorry. Go ahead. Tell me what you know about Jake Haener. Do you know much?
I don't know a lot. I only know a couple of the games that I watched from him. Big one being I watched the Jimmy Kimmel Bowl. Don't know why I watched the Jimmy Kimmel Bowl, but I watched the Jimmy Kimmel Bowl, and they looked pretty good against Washington State. Granted, it is Washington State, so I'm taking that with a grain of salt. But Jake Haener looks pretty good in that game, considering he had 2 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, and threw for over 280 yards. So he did look pretty good. I'm excited to see. I'm really excited.
Hold
to see
on,
him.
Kyle. Let me go let my cat back in. She got trapped in here. Give me 1 second.
He got
trapped. Oh, never mind. She's good. Never mind. She's good. But yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry. I could hear her meowing in the background, and it was killing me.
You're good. You're good. I was just gonna say I'm excited to see his combine footage.
Yeah.
Because I think that's really gonna be where he to see if he's trending upwards to near Anthony Richardson or Hendon Hooker type draft class, or if he's trending down mid 4th, 5th round area.
So I will tell you, I watched some of the better competition he played just to go see what he looked like against better teams. So I watched Oregon State and UCLA from 2021. Oregon State was this year, where Oregon State was a top 25 team. UCLA in top 21 was in 2021 was ranked 13th. So I wanted to see how he played against those guys so that I could see him against better competition. And in both games, I thought he played very well. Oregon State 29 of 45, 360 yards, a touchdown, no picks. UCLA, they beat UCLA, and he ended up going 39 of 53 for 455 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception. Again, going through the strengths and weaknesses. His accuracy and his ability to read the field is high end for someone who is, he's older, he's 24, but it's high end for a rookie quarterback. And he exposes mismatches. Wow, I can't talk today. And also, he exploits zone coverage better than most rookies that I've seen. He knows how to manipulate with his eyes, which is not something you normally see from a rookie quarterback. He doesn't try to play outside of the system. He plays within the Fresno State system, throws the ball on time, doesn't ever really make stupid mistakes, and he's athletic enough to escape the pocket and get first downs, which I think is a plus. I don't think you need to be uber athletic to play quarterback in the NFL. I think you need to be athletic enough at this point in time. The weaknesses start with his frame, much like Bryce Young. He's 6'1", 200 pounds, so the injury issues are a concern. He was injured last year in 2022 and missed a few games. I think he missed about a month. His frame is better than Bryce Young's, who is 6'1", 190. He's an inch taller and about 10 pounds heavier, but it's the same concerns that I had with Bryce Young earlier. And he's not going to make incredible plays outside of the system. He's not going to make off-scheduled throws. He's not going to do anything miraculous like you would see Bryce Young do. And again, I only use Bryce Young here as a comparison because of the similar frames and play styles. And he's not athletic enough to truly be a threat. His footwork's really good. His throwing motion is wonderful. He's got a quick release. I really liked what I saw from Jake Haener. I think he's a really good quarterback. Again, not somebody you want starting for you. That's not what you're going to find in later rounds of the draft for the most part. Brock Purdy's are, few and far between. And I wouldn't say you want Brock Purdy starting for you ideally either, but he's serviceable enough to do it, especially if you're in a system like the 49ers. Speaking of which, his top fits are the 49ers, Seahawks, and Dolphins.
Yeah, I think Jake Haener is really going to be a quality backup. I could even see him being a fringe quarterback at some point in his career. Um, I kind of am excited to see how he turns out. Because I liked what I saw from him in the one game I saw of him.
No, and I mean, I watched both 2021 and 2022 tape because sometimes it's hard to find all of the games that you want to see. So I had to watch both. I made sure I got through enough of it. And again, I mean, I didn't see a single game where I didn't like the way that Jake Haener played. Let me put it that way. And I even watched the San Diego State game where he threw 2 picks. One of them was his fault. The other one wasn't. But again, I think this is a really strong backup quarterback as long as his frame doesn't scare you away from actually playing him in the situations that he could play in. Again, do you want him as your day one starter? Absolutely not. But he's a serviceable backup in the league, and I really like Jake Haener. Of the 3 quarterbacks we talked about today, I would probably go Jake Haener, Tanner McKee, and then Hendon Hooker. The age really gets me on Hendon Hooker, and the limitation of him having to play in an RPO offense really frustrates me. I think he can thrive in one of those RPO offenses. Like if, say he goes to the Dolphins and Tua gets hurt or Tua can't start like the year, I think Hendon Hooker becomes a very serviceable option for them, and I think he wins games as the Dolphins quarterback. I'm just not in love with Hendon Hooker. Like, if he comes to the Patriots, he's not a successful quarterback. If he goes to the Cowboys, probably not a successful quarterback. If he gets picked up by the Packers, not a successful quarterback. He needs to be in that RPO style offense, which is all he's ever known, to be successful. So
Yeah, and
that's my real drawback.
I don't know a whole lot about the other 2 quarterbacks to really rank them. But from what I saw of Hendon Hooker, I see the concern you have with him and only being successful in an RPO system. It really depends on if other teams really could see him fitting in with their system, or if they think that he could develop out of just an RPO style system. I think that's really what's going to come down to.
Honestly, I think it would take a lot of work, and with a 25-year-old rookie, you're kind of worried about that. If Hendon Hooker was 21, he may very well be a first-round quarterback right now. But he's 25, so we don't I wouldn't take him anywhere in the top 2 rounds. I think this is a 3rd or 4th round guy, depending on what your team looks at and what your team needs as a quarterback. Again, I like all 3 of these guys. That's not a knock on Hendon Hooker. I know a lot of people love Hendon Hooker. I like all 3 of these guys as serviceable backups in the league, depending on the situation they get put in. But again, Hendon Hooker being last on this list solely because I think the fact that he's 25 and he needs to have an RPO offense is going to limit him a little bit. But on that note, thanks for watching. Again, if you guys like the video, remember to like and subscribe. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at High School Backups on all 3. On that note, peace.